health issues. Now, when it comes to talking about human rights, everybody is supposed to get their fair share. It's supposed to be a universal thing. But what happens when you are somebody suffering from mental health illness? We're going to be going on the phones very soon with a senior staff nurse at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital. She should be on the phone with us right now. And one of the first things I would actually want to know, she's on the line, is what is defined as a mentally ill person. So right now I'm joined by Edwina Ankomase, who should be on the line. Good morning. Okay, I've been told she just went off the line. So as we're working to just get her back on the line now, most of us have seen people who, most of us, is quite, people call them mad, people call them all sorts of names, walking around the streets all over this country, who should be responsible for their housing, their needs, their just even basic rights. Sometimes you also see pregnant, supposedly mentally ill people. Who are the ones who get these women pregnant? We're going to be discussing that in just a moment. So Edwina, good morning, Edwina.
Good morning.
How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Very well, thank you. First thing I want to ask is, when we talk about a mentally ill person, what is the meaning of it? If you say somebody is mentally ill,
in lay terms, we can say somebody who is not psychologically balanced in relation to their, and this can be seen in maybe how they relate to each other, how they relate to people, and even in their job cases, how they behave there for a period of time. That is a simple term, just to say.
Okay, now Edwina, most of the times, if we're just on the streets of Accra or most parts of this country, it's not uncommon for us to see people who have mental health issues walking around unaided. Some of them sleep on the streets and so forth. And most people just call them mad. Most of them get treated really bad. Is it right? How should a person, when we see them, these people on the streets, how should we react to them? Should we approach them? Should we go near them? Because it seems like most people in society just ignore these people.
Most often, most of them are not. You can't really say for a mentally ill person whether the person would be aggressive at this point or maybe in the next few seconds. But mostly, they are approachable. Some of them are approachable. Though you may not be able to say, they may not be able to respond to you in the way you would want them to. Most of them are approachable. And if, as a nation, we also take as our responsibility to help bring them to the hospitals, it will help somehow to reduce the number of mentally ill patients we see in loitering on the street. But at the same time, when we say bring them to the psychiatric hospital for help, because it's everybody's responsibility, it's my responsibility, it's your responsibility, it's everybody's responsibility. At the same time, we should make sure the health facilities have enough, are fully equipped to embrace and take care of them.
Okay, now we tend to make the assumption that mentally ill people are only the ones who roam the streets, but of course that's not the case. There are people who are in offices, some people have mental breakdowns, so many issues. How do you deal with either a family member or colleague that you suspect is having some kind of mental disorder or suffering from mental illness?
I think Dr. Sarah always says that all of us have a little bit of like a mental breakdown at a point, because you could be there, you just don't feel like talking to anybody. It's not a mental breakdown. It's normal for you to not feel like talking to anybody. It becomes a problem when it's extremely done. Okay, so, and sometimes, most of the time, about 80% of the time, most of the people themselves don't even know that this is a problem they have. It's like we around would notice that there's a change in their behavior. And with the stress of the economic problem, is putting a lot of stress on most Ghanaians. So as any day, any time, most people will break down. So even in the hospitals, we have a high number of people walking in because they are having a mental problem, a mental breakdown at a point. And when we say a mental breakdown, most people actually think it is seeing the person all dirty, being aggressive at a point, and all those things. We have people who are extremely anxious, which is they are very afraid of things, and which is also type of mental disorder. We even have people who have ear migraines, tension, headaches, and this is just to name a few. Even in your job places, sometimes we hear that somebody has committed suicide. But perhaps if we had observed a little closer, you'd have seen that the person was extremely depressed, and that was why the person has committed a suicide. So it's everybody has a problem like that, but has a mental breakdown at a point in time. But when it goes into the extreme point, then it is a problem for and it becomes everybody's responsibility, even those around. It is your responsibility to make sure that the person gets help for the problems that they are having.
Okay, now I know the Mental Health Act, which was passed, I think last year, that came into effect last year. One of the main focuses of it was making sure that they're treated humanely. Now, if you go into most of the prayer camps, most of the faith-based healers, where a lot of times people with mental illness, they end up there first before they even would find their way to the psychiatric hospitals. You find them being chained. I myself have been witness to, people suffering from mental illness chained, and it's still happening today. Do you think enough is being done? Not just our faith-based healers, but even with the psychiatric hospital and obviously with the health services, to make sure these purely, it's human rights abuse to chain people, should be stopped. Do you think enough is being done?
Okay. In our cultural setting, I think it's so easy for people, even if people have a habit at their homes. The first thing they do is maybe pray about it, but before thinking that it's a serious thing that they have to go to a hospital with it. So it's not just with mental illness. We have that problem a lot in the hospitals, where most people would have gone to a lot of places, like a lot of either faith healers or even a herbalist or anywhere before coming. And in such cases, sometimes by the time they come, the condition is worse than normal. Yes, the mental health bill is coming on board to help, because we can't do everything alone. So I think the best thing we are trying to do is to collaborate with such individuals and find out how best we can make their surroundings okay. At least when they take the patients and they decide to treat the patient based on maybe their beliefs, we should make sure that at least the patient is in a good environment, the patient is not chained to a tree, the patient is having a room to himself or herself, the patient is well treated. You see, because we can't automatically say that all patients shouldn't go there. You would have, say, some people going there. So in a way to help solve such problems, we have to collaborate, and that is what the mental health bill is.
Oh, it seemed like we lost the line. Edwina? Okay, that was Edwina Ankoma Say, who is a senior staff nurse at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital. We'll try and get the line back. We're just trying to get the line back. Just to, if you've just joined us, we're talking about human rights. Obviously, fundamental human rights is supposed to be a right for every single human being. But what happens if you're a person suffering with mental illness? A lot of times we see them across, in our daily walks on the streets, and we ignore them. But as she said on the phone, it is each and every single one of us. It's all our responsibility. Most people will take it as it's for the family members that should be the one looking after them. Some people take them to faith-based healers. Others will also think that, okay, well, hey, it's up to the government to get at least the obvious ones, as we call, off our streets. But we know that mental illness can happen to anybody. It can actually happen to, anybody, people in your offices, around your communities, and so forth. So yeah, we're just having that conversation. We're trying right now to get Edwina back on the line. Okay, she's back on the line. Edwina, sorry, lost you there. Just a couple more questions to end. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is, I know a lot of times when it comes to people who are mentally ill, is their family, their immediate families or their loved ones who are tasked with looking after them. Now, I'm sure that can be quite demanding, especially if, the people have, up and down or mood swings, or if they're violent. What can these family members do in order to help support those who are mentally ill, especially when it becomes too much?
Okay. Unfortunately, in Ghana, most people mental illness is stigmatized, even including the staff that work in the hospital. Everybody is stigmatized. So sometimes it's very difficult when you treat, even with the little plan that we brought up where we do Operation Clear the Streets and we bring in some patients. We can't bring a large number of patients because the hospital capacity is not that much to take all of them. But even with that, tracing their families, taking them back home, some it is successful. With some, they just don't want the people home, and they think they can't deal with them. And they end up leaving them here, and some of them would have been here for a long period of time, for like maybe 10 to 15 years and all of that. So we are trying our best because we still go back to the homes to try and take them home, okay? And when you take them home, you try to educate the family. And we just hope that as we educate them, they receive it and they do as we are asking them to do, because we want to collaborate with them. Because when they have their families, they get better. They get better than maybe them being treated in just the hospitals with no family coming in. So it's a challenge, but we hope that with time, things will get better.
Okay, now I know there's a number of community mental health officers who have been trained, and I know that some of them working within the communities in the rural areas all over Ghana. How helpful do you think this introduction of having them going into the communities, into the homes of mentally ill people, how helpful do you think this has been?
How
helpful do you think this has been, at least in terms of the care that mentally ill people receive from their homes?
Okay, I hope I heard what you said.
I'm talking about the community mental health officers.
Okay. I'm saying with the community health officers, we are trying to treat the mentally ill in their community, so then they can be accepted easier than them being in the institutions. So that is helping with them being treated in the community. Though sometimes some of them don't feel comfortable because they feel people will see them and stigmatize them. But with the community health officers, they are helping us a lot because they help us treat the patients in the community. They even help us find patients in the community who are not well treated by their relatives. You understand? So they are being of help. I think the only difficulty is how they move, because they don't have enough logistics, because some of them will have to walk long miles to go to people's house. Some of them can even be attacked by the people in the house, those are some of the challenges. But I think it's a good step in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Just lastly, Edwina, just to ask, you're saying that it should be the responsibility of every single person to make sure that if you see somebody who you know has a mental illness, to get them to maybe a health facility. But a lot of times most people are afraid. What advice, what is the best way to approach somebody that you suspect is, has mental issues, or maybe you're afraid that you'd be attacked? What's the best way to approach them? Or should you approach them at all?
Sometimes, say if you're afraid, you could involve the police, the assistance of the police, to help you bring them to the hospital. Sometimes, because that I think that's the best thing, because you can't just sometimes approach them on your own. There are some that when you talk to them, you realize that you say something and they become lucid. When you say lucid, at a point in time, they are okay. They can have a normal conversation. So some of them, when you approach them and you have a conversation, you realize it's going well, you could actually, find a way to bring them here. Because there are a number of times where we've had Good Samaritans bring patients in. And I think about 2 days ago, there was a patient who had an attack at around circles. I was passing by, and then one of the fellows said, I'm a nurse, so I should go and see them. They managed to put her, and she was a psychiatric patient, they managed to put her at a safe place, bought her food, I spoke to her. So there are people who are trying. Okay. So that's what I'm saying, you can be afraid because you cannot tell when the patients will go haywire or new or be aggressive at that point. But when you try approaching and you realize this is not going to be safe, you can involve the police people or maybe some strong men around to help you bring them to the hospital.
Okay. All right. I want to say a big thank you to Edwina Ankomase, who is the senior staff nurse at the Accra Psychiatric Hospital.